Been studying the problem for the past 7 years. I do see a glaring connection between the high use of these psychoactive substances and the rise of violence.
If people knew that the mechanism was not known of these drugs, that they could cause, if there's a real chance for them to get a homicidal tendency or even suicide, if you take the drug, there's a chance you may want to kill yourself.
And I could repeat probably a dozen other examples of significant self-inflicted harm or significant violence to others in patients who had never had that experience in their adult life.
Patienter som en morfar från Wyoming, Donald Shell.
Donald Shell was a man in his 60s, a gentleman, a family man, a funny man. He had periodic episodes of depression, but never any real serious mental health issues, and became depressed, had a down period, went to a general practitioner and was given Paxil. 2 days later, he shot his wife, his daughter, his 9-month-old granddaughter, and then himself. The first question the jury was asked, very telling question, can Paxil cause some people to commit homicide and or suicide? To which they answered yes.
Donald Shell gick på Paxil under bara några dagar innan han reagerade på medlet med mord. Men långvarigt bruk av personlighetsförändrande medel har också visat sig ge skador för livet. Ett ovälkommet faktum som psykiatrikerna struntar i.
In the long run, the side effects may actually be worse than the original condition.
I don't think the average patient has any idea that the long-term use of this drug is now associated with very serious diseases, with diabetes, with kidney failure, with tardive dyskinesia, a movement disorder that's very serious and permanent and irreversible.
You can be affected by these drugs in any part of your body, your brain, your heart, your kidneys.
That's why people die early very often, because they are prescribed things, and the long-term effects are in some cases the death of the individual.
Och mer skada skapas när psykiatrikern skor sig genom att skriva ut flera olika psykiatriska medel. Det ena för att motverka biverkningar från ett annat.
If you have drugs that create side effects, that gives you a ready market for more drugs to cure the side effects. It seems to me that it's a self-propagating system.
And what ends up happening is that each one of those new drugs that's added into the scenario brings on another symptom for which there's another drug, for which there's another symptom, for which there's another drug.
And it just snowballs into a vicious circle of one drug causing the need for another drug.
Sometimes people come and they're on such a cocktail of so many different drugs for so many different things.
It's rare now that I see a senior citizen that is on less than 5 or 6 drugs at one time. Some 12, 15.
One will lead to the next, and they're all toxic. This is how the game is played.
Efterhand som psykiatrikerna sprider sin lukrativa verksamhet med personlighetsförändrande drogning allt mer i samhället har barn blivit de senaste och mest tragiska offren.
Rebecca Riley, 2.5 years old, they diagnosed her with bipolar disorder and ADHD. They had her on an antipsychotic, they had her on a heart drug, they say, for ADHD, and they had her on an anti-seizure. And then one other one for side effects. 4 drugs at 2.5 years old. She can't even zip up her own pants. She's like a little rag doll. The school nurse, 2 teachers, the principal, the social worker, all said they never seen any behavior in this little 4-year-old girl that would warrant these kind of medications. And all specifically called this doctor and said, please take her off these. She died at a little over 4 years old. This little girl that didn't have a chance, and the psychiatrist just let her.
Istället för att ställas inför rätta och få fängelse har Rebecca Rileys psykiatriker Dr. Kayoko Kifuji inte ens förlorat sin licens. Man kan fråga sig hur psykiatriker kommer undan. Svaret ligger i ett juridiskt begrepp känt som standardmässig vård.
The standard of care is based on what do other doctors do? What would a reasonable physician do in this situation? And the reality is that what most physicians do is prescribe medications.
As long as they've done their paperwork properly and documented that
that this child had the symptoms that led them to this conclusion. They appear to be completely protected from any kind of a lawsuit as a result.
The standard of care is what allows doctors to seriously injure or even kill a patient with total impunity.
So the standard of care now has been implemented to where you can get away with, if you're a medical doctor, psychiatrist, you can get away with murder.
Och dödsfallen fortsätter att öka. Personlighetsförändrande medel dödar nu uppskattningsvis 42 000 personer varje år.
The cost to society is very real and very devastating. But the medicine they're practicing isn't real. It's a hoax.
Profit always comes before patient safety, and they take a very short-sighted view. It's all about how can we make money today, not what price are we going to pay tomorrow.
The trail of destruction that a psychiatrist leaves in his path is of no concern to that guy. It's all that money.
Och det handlar om stora pengar. Psykiatrin är idag en $300 miljarder industri, utan en enda som botats. Och efterhand som fler banbrytande framsteg utlovas av psykiatrikerna fortsätter deras sjuka, skadade och döda offer att öka. I och med att allmänheten och du själv är oskyddade måste ni försvara er själva.
My wife and I are blessed. We have 7 children, and we love them all. They're all our favorites. Each child we have is our favorites. And Beth was extremely special.
She was kind, generous. She had like a really sweet and caring personality.
She had this beautiful smile, like an inviting.
She could make friends with basically any stranger on the street and get a smile or a laugh out of them.
Beth was having a hard time sleeping for maybe 4, 5, or 6 weeks. And so we said, Beth, you should go to the doctor and get something to help you sleep.
He said, okay, well, I'll try to give you something to lessen your anxiety, and it should help you sleep.
Within 5 minutes, a 5-minute visit, he prescribed her Paxil. When I first saw Beth right after she went on the Paxil, she was different. Like, I felt like she was drugged. And by the 2nd or 3rd day, she's like, I don't know, I just don't feel right. You know, I feel strange in my skin.
But after about 3 or 4 days, I remember that Beth was, at times, very different, like sullen, keeping to herself.
My mom and her were having dinner, and she said she didn't have any real emotion. Like, she kind of felt emotionally numb.
She was like a different person. Like, she just seemed like she was under the influence of something. She didn't seem like herself. She seemed like she was tripping out.
I talked to her on the phone, and she told me she didn't want to be there. And I was like, why don't we be there? She's like, I just don't feel like myself. I just feel like crazy. I just don't feel right.
I truly believe that she was hallucinating maybe and going in and out of this psychotic state at this point.
It seemed like she was melting down, like emotionally. She was becoming worse every day.
I said, are you suicidal? I actually asked her. And she laughed at me. And she said, no, I would never do that. And I'm thinking in my mind, I'm just going to lay down next to her and I'll rub her head and I'll talk to her and we'll try to figure out what we're going to do because something's not right here. And my son Matthew was right behind me going upstairs. And when I got to the top of the stairs, I saw her hanging in the hallway.
Then the police were all over the place and people were coming and going, and about 3 hours, 4 hours after my daughter died, one of my friends came over and said, you know, I was speaking to so-and-so, one of our other friends, and she said, oh, Beth must have been on Paxil. That's the only way she would kill herself.
It just wasn't her. Like, there was nothing in her that would have done that. She was the most non-violent, like gentle. It's a violent way to die.
It had to be the drug. There was no other answer. If we knew what we knew now, Beth would be here with us today. I know that for a fact.
Den tragiska berättelsen om Beth Winter är bara en av många. En som upprepas varhelst psykiatriska medel skrivs ut. Men psykiatriker insisterar på att man ska tro att deras preparat är säkra och effektiva. För de är experterna på psykisk hälsa, och det är inte du. Men fall efter fall visar att det kan få katastrofala följder om man litar på dem.
Psychiatry is pseudoscience. It's false science. It cannot withstand rigorous review if people would just look at the evidence.
If they help anyone, it's not worth the risk to the people that are harmed by them.
They are betraying every customer they have.
They don't know what they're doing, and we need to educate the public to use their feet and walk away.
Och hur kan allmänheten bli bättre informerad? Genom att utöva en medicinsk rättighet som få patienter känner till, men som psykiatriker är mycket väl bekanta med.
We want to be able to present the patient with alternatives. And one of the central ideas in ethics is informed consent.
The components of informed consent are letting the person know, first of all, what the diagnosis is and what it's based on, so that they can say, this is why we need to treat you. And secondly, what the treatment is.
Every patient in the healthcare system has a right to informed consent. That is, they have a right to be told the risks and benefits of the treatment, the risks and benefits of alternative treatments, and the risks and benefits of no treatment at all.
Patients should be totally informed, fully informed about every medication that the psychiatrist offers to them to take or says they should take.
Och undersökningar bekräftar att mycket lite fullständig och korrekt information om psykiatriska medel når allmänheten. Så vad skulle fullständigt och korrekt informerat samtycke om psykiatriska medel bestå av? Dessa läkare och experter har omfattande erfarenhet i ämnet. Först och främst, psykiatriska störningar är inte faktiska sjukdomar som kräver medicinsk behandling.
It's true that there's no biological findings that really support any of these psychiatric diagnoses being medical illnesses. And the burden of proof really is the other way around. It's not that you have to prove that there is no biological science. The burden is on psychiatry to prove that there is.
There's no blood test. There's no lab test. There's no x-ray. These are just clusters of behavior that a group of psychiatrists have voted that it's a disease.
Can you imagine doctors having to have powwows to decide if a heart attack is a real disease or not? No, they don't have to decide that. They don't have to have a vote on that.
They should be asking the doc, geez doc, where's the chemical test for that? Where is the objective test for this? And I guarantee you that they'll be told, we don't have a chemical test for that.
There is no such thing as a chemical imbalance. And any psychiatrist that you talk to, if you ask him this question, they'll all admit it in private, but they won't admit it in public. It's a scandal.
So this is all subjective. Nothing objective about psychiatry.
För det andra, det finns inga vetenskapliga bevis för att personlighetsförändrande medel hanterar några psykiska problem.
Since there is no measurement for these psychiatric diagnoses, because they're really just subjective, for the same reason there really can't be a measurement for the effects of the drug.
In terms of medication, the evidence that's claimed is the medications are highly effective and not very toxic. But actually, in fact, the data in psychiatry are very clear that that's not true. What is true is that the medications are barely, if at all, more effective than placebo.
You're selling drugs to people under false premises, under a disease that's been invented. So how do you measure efficacy among a disease that doesn't even exist?
För det tredje, personlighetsförändrande medel döljer symptom och ger allvarliga biverkningar på kort och lång sikt.
Whatever problem you're being treated for, whether it's depression, real or otherwise, or cardiovascular disease, medicating away the symptoms is not solving the problem.
The patent medication gives the appearance of having helped because in the short term it usually doesn't show the bad effects that are going to happen in the long term. So it's very deceptive.
The longer the patient's on the medication, the worse the prognosis is.
None of these medications hit precise targets. You begin accumulating all kinds of collateral damage. In other words, other organs in the body are actually harmed.
So for the first time, we're seeing kids in grade school or middle school who have type 2 diabetes and who have the beginning stages of cardiovascular disease.
So you see Parkinson's disease, you see tardive dyskinesias, you see other movement disorders.
Is it true that